It is my absolute pleasure. I know everyone does know Ash, but I do feel like I need to do an intro for Ash, and it's super embarrassing when someone stands right next to you to do it, so it's so much fun. So Dr. Ashley Thornton is the co-leader of the Kids Rehab WA research team and has been a senior member of the team since 2017. She holds a collaborative academic position between the Child and Adolescent Health Service and the University of Western Australia. Her work is focused on improving the health, well-being and development of children by both conducting high-quality research and translation of knowledge into practice. As we all know, Ash is very passionate about empowering consumers, clinicians, students and community members to be active contributors in the research process. A lot of you will recognise Ash as the co-host of ResearchWorks podcast, and her love for qualitative research and knowledge translation is very evident. Her ability to pronounce complex words and names is matched by no other. I'm so grateful to have friends like Ash in the industry. She's a beautiful person inside and out. So thank you so much for making the time today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ashley Thornton.
Thank you.
Always pleasant, isn't it?
It's so nice to be in such a trendy room. It's
I know,
beautiful.
it is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool, yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about science communication. And we're actually going to attempt to record this as a podcast as we're going. So we shall see how we go. Ed is in the back there probably madly making sure everything is working. When we came up with the idea to record it, he did raise his eyebrows. So we shall see how we go through this. But science communication is something we're both really passionate about. And we didn't quite realise that there was a term for people who talk on podcasts or, decide to try to get evidence out. It is called science communication. And I guess the core thing of that is, why do we need to communicate science? I remember many years ago being really perplexed that I saw in an article and it said it takes an average of 17 years for new knowledge to get into the hands of people who need it. And I was like, baloney. 17 years? How could that be? And I have to say, now that I've lived it out, I can see how it takes 17 years, right? Because when you think about the things that, Ginny Pallig was saying, the things that you might need to discover and move through, there's a process for us as clinicians. So not only do researchers need to do the research, they need to translate it to the clinicians, hopefully answering the right questions. We go through our process, and then there's another element to it, and that's communicating that research to the consumers. So that's quite a long process. But then I felt this sense of urgency, because if you're talking about 17 years, a child that was born 17 years ago has missed the boat on the 17 years of knowledge. And then that got me really thinking, and I didn't feel very happy about that. So we actually need to communicate science. And everything we're going to learn today and talk about, our job is then to be able to communicate this to more people. But there are actually evidence-based interventions and management and strategies that we can incorporate to help us to communicate, because it's not something that I think a lot of us learn formally through a university degree. You kind of do your first home visit and you're plunged into the workplace and you go, all right, off you go. It's not always such a simple process, and so that's why I feel like we need to communicate science.
I agree.
Thank goodness. That is good.
So it's one thing to communicate science, but I suppose the other thing that we wanted to touch on today is when to know what science or legitimate science to communicate and how you do that. And I think as we all moved through our schooling or our university degrees, we were taught how you search databases, you find literature, you interpret that literature, and then you kind of use it either in your practice or you communicate it to people. But there's so many other avenues to gather information these days, and the internet is a big bad one. Social media is another one. And so the work of Jessica Stokes-Parish, who we spoke to very recently on the podcast, her and her team have done a lot of work to really pull together a simple mnemonic that you can use to try and discern whether information is worth communicating or not. And the reason there are all these beautiful crabs on the slide here is because the mnemonic is crabs. So when you're looking at information, you can quickly flick through each of these criteria to see if it's something that is worth communicating or not. The first one is the website or the person that you're gaining this information from, do they have any conflicts of interest that are of note? Do they have skin in the game? Do they have something to gain from you having this information? That's always something to be mindful of. R stands for references, pretty straightforward. Are they actually referencing what they're saying, or are they jumping on a social media platform and waxing lyrical about something without any evidence to back that up?
Yeah.
Authors is another one. Do the authors have a credible background to be giving you the kind of information that they're giving you? And you can, discern that pretty quickly from a LinkedIn search, from a university website search. If they say they're from somewhere, you can check that pretty readily nowadays. Buzzwords is another big one. We love a buzzword. I think Ginny touched on a couple of buzzwords in her presentation earlier, but are they trying to incite an emotion or a reaction from you by using some of those buzzwords? Like, it's not necessarily applicable to what we're talking about today, but I think of someone saying that something is 100% organic.
100%, I'm in.
What does that really mean? Is that a good thing or not? Or are we just buying in to the buzzword when we're talking about that? And the final one is quite a big one, and we'll touch on it again a bit later, but scope of practice. So is the person or the website or the source that you're getting this information from qualified to talk on that particular topic? So Jessica gave us quite an alarming example of scope of practice. A student over in New South Wales very recently was found out to have established a TikTok account where they were moonlighting as a qualified medical doctor. They were not. I think they were doing an undergraduate degree in medical science or something like that. But no one had bothered to check their qualifications, and so this TikTok account had kind of spiraled out of control, and this person was actually giving medical advice to people on TikTok. That was shut down pretty quickly once they found out, but it's just worth checking whether the person or the place you're getting the information from is qualified to talk to that.
Yeah, it's really worthwhile, and crabs is something that we'll refer to a lot. But when you're looking at, Instagram or Facebook or anything on social media, this is something that you can apply, or we can teach our families to apply this too when they're trying to discern information. Yeah. Okay, so the next one that we really want to focus our time on today is how we can harness these evidence-based weapons of influence. It sounds really cool.
It does. Sounds powerful, doesn't it?
Sounds really powerful.
So we've talked about, what we should be communicating, and I suppose where we move to now is how we actually go about communicating that. And the weapons of influence that we're going to cover today are drawn from a psychologist, Robert Cialdini, and his theory of social influence. So he has a framework organised around these 6 primary principles. There's recently been a 7th one added, but there's not such a large evidence base for that as yet, so we're not going to cover that. And I think they're particularly powerful because they really highlight the frightening ease with which we are influenced by the people and the information around us. And as we work through these and we give you some tangible examples of each of these concepts, I think a lot of people go, oh yeah, no, that's, yes, I too have been influenced by some of these weapons before.
Yep.
So some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them have, I suppose, a little bit of a darker side to them. So we're going to cover all of those in turn and talk about how you might like to use these for good to promote messaging with families, with other clinicians, with people that you're talking to about science.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so the first one, liking. I feel like this is one that makes sense, but it is worth going through. It does pay off to be nice.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a pretty straightforward one. And I will say that there's a long history of research into each of these weapons. They've been tested in a lot of psychological experiments and they do hold up, and this one in particular holds up quite strongly, and it's pretty straightforward. You are more likely to accept or endorse a message or a piece of information when it comes from someone that you like. So that's it. So I think that is really critical for clinicians because it speaks to those soft skills that we talk about. We talk about a lot on the podcast, but I think it's something that is really important, you know, just in life in general. Likeable people are perceived to be more trustworthy, more familiar, and so you're more likely to gain traction with a message if you are taking that personable, likeable approach.
And I love this one because it allows you to be yourself if you believe yourself to be a likeable person.
Caveat.
That's true. But I think the point of this one for me, what I take away from that is life is so busy. We can get caught up in busy. I try not to say, when people ask me, how have you been? I go, oh, really busy, because I feel like everyone's really busy to our different levels of capacity, right? But what I never want to take away from being too busy is having those really good, fruitful conversations with people. If I'm ever late for a meeting, I always tell someone, look, I need to work on my time management from that perspective. But it's usually because I'm having a conversation with someone and I can't just leave them part way through it. If I'm too busy to be having those conversations because the clinic's busier and I've got more things to go to, and I'm losing that part where I can have those conversations with the people which are really important, then I've probably veered a little bit too far down a path that I don't want to be in. And that's my personal investment into it. But I think this is a really easy guide for us to kind of go, you know, when you're feeling really torn in your time, if that is the case, I make sure I pare down all those other areas so I can always focus on the people element. And that's just liking. It's not because I've got a desire to be liked. I just want to make sure that people are getting what they need when they want to see me.
Yeah. I think it ties in really nicely to this concept of empathy as well, and holding space for, as you said, the conversations, but also how people are feeling in the moment and not rushing them through, you know, a process because you've got an endpoint that you're trying to get to. But, and Jenny touched on it beautifully in her keynote as well, with motivational interviewing, you're really bringing people along for the journey and holding space for that, and it will get you much further than, you know, pushing your agenda or your pace or, you know, the things that you're trying to get out of a conversation or a session.
I think that's encouraging because when you're in a session and you feel like you spend a lot of time talking, there's value in it. And so rest easy because that's a really good investment. Okay, the next one is authority. Both good and bad, I think.
Okay, so when Cialdini talks about authority and how we use that to influence others, we're really talking about people of authority. So authority figures like doctors, clinicians, teachers are more likely to persuade people to comply with a request or a message when they highlight their expertise and credentials compared to when they don't. And unfortunately, there is a little bit of a gender element to this one as well, in that holds particularly true for females in position of authority. So highlighting, you know, your expertise in the area is more likely to gain a favourable outcome in terms of taking on board that message. But I think the other thing that we need to consider in science communication is our authority around the evidence base. So showing that you have the knowledge in a particular area, you know, having a track record in that area ties into what we were talking about with crabs and our scope of practice, I think. And having the confidence to communicate that.
And I think that's a really important one. When you look people up online, everyone looks each other up online. Let's just be really honest about it. So when families are wanting to find out, you know, which therapist they might want to go for, they'll look for you online. And I know we want to be able to divide personal and professional, you know, identities, but it is worth having a professional identity online because people are going to look for you. So when you look at crabs and you look for the possible authority who don't actually have authority, they're very happy to put whatever it is they can on there to buff up what's there. But if there's nothing for you there, that it's really hard for people to make a decision about it. So my take home from this is just to have some place, whether it is on your social media, whether it is on your LinkedIn profile, keep it up to date and list out all the things that you do, because that is a very powerful way that families are going to be able to take to your recommendations or having other discussions with other professionals. Yeah. Simple one, but effective.
Powerful.
Yeah, that's right.
Scarcity. Okay, this one's my favourite. I can't work out why.
You do say this
I think because
yeah.
I recognise how many times I have been duped by the weapon of scarcity. And I think anyone who's been on an accommodation website, don't want to name names, but booking.com, you're looking for your accommodation for a conference or something like that, and you see only 2 rooms left.
Quick.
At this rate. Book now.
Go.
And
yep.
You do, because you don't want to miss out. And that is a really powerful weapon of influence.
It is.
And I think when Dana and I started trying to unpack this and what it means from a science communication or how we communicate with families perspective, this is a really powerful weapon of influence, because rare opportunities are perceived to be more valuable than opportunities that are more available to us.
Yep.
And I think we can all think about kind of clinical examples of instances where scarcity plays into decisions that families are making about their care.
Yeah, and I think that can really, it can skew so easily with good intent. You might have a cancellation that's come up, you've got a whole program that's available, you want to make sure someone can make use of it, but our language and our wording really plays into that too. So there's only one program left, quick, get in. And it might come from good intent, but someone might go for it mainly because of scarcity, whether it fits in or not. That's just a simple example of our language, and our intentions behind it might be really good, but it can sort of propel a family into doing something that they might not need to. Or on the other flip side of it, we keep talking about early intervention being so important. It's so important. We keep talking about it, and it truly is. But what that can also go down the path of is families feel like they've got to feel every moment of every day. So if this becomes available, I'll take it. If this becomes available, I'll take it. And it's just worth knowing that this scarcity element is something that can really influence how people make decisions.
Yeah. So I suppose when those opportunities come up, it's about having a conversation with the family, making sure that they are informed about that decision and whether that decision truly is the right one for them at that point in time to take on that program or to take on that opportunity, or can you provide some justification as to why maybe they don't need to do that?
Yeah, that's right. And all of this acknowledging, what we put here is activity-based funding. A lot of our interventions now, how we're all funded is through activity-based funding. There's no doubt, right? You provide a service, this is what happens, and that can sometimes drive those decisions. So I'm not saying this is easy. There's bottom lines that need to be thought about too. But if you're always driven by trying to create the best for your families, it all comes back. I do believe that. But there are things at play that can make this quite challenging. Yeah.
Social proof.
I love this one.
Okay, this is your favourite one.
Yeah, this one's my favourite.
So back in the 70s, I think it was, Cialdini or one of his colleagues did an experiment to really highlight the power of social proof, and it's a really simple one. They got someone to walk out the front of a building in whatever city they were in and just stand there and look up. And they observed what happened, and gradually more and more people came and stood next to this person and started looking up, and this person didn't say what they were looking at or what they were doing. And eventually there was a crowd of about 40 people there just standing and looking up and waiting for something to happen. And I think it's really simple, but it's a really powerful demonstration of social proof. And people tend to follow social norms or adopt the behaviour of the people around them, where it's human nature, it's what we are designed to do. And when we think about the implications of that for our communication or how our families are communicating with each other, I think that's pretty evident in some of the things that we see.
It is
clinically.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's the fact that, TikTok is something that is in our world now. I don't think you can really fight it. It's there. It's pretty strong. But the messaging is usually, they say, 7 seconds is probably the long end of a message. It's really hard to get your message across in 7 seconds. But what can also really influence things is, I guess, knowing how you might answer those questions really early on. You know, don't take too long to get there, answer the question, then give some really good ways of explaining it. But that goes with how we communicate with people, because social media has decreased that time of which we concentrate. I hope they've been concentrating. 7 seconds has passed in saying that. But, you know, what we can look at for that is, you know, TikTok accounts or whatever it might be with a lot of social proof. So a lot of likes on a particular video for a particular technique, because therapy might be out there. You know, what we can do together is band together as health professionals who, you know, it doesn't have to be on social media, but we come together from time to time and we also get that social proof in that way. We all understand what we're going for. You're not in it on your own. I think there's a lot of soul practitioners who can do and provide so much value in our community, but it can also be really isolating. And so to have that ability to get together is why we're doing this. But sharing stories, that's really important, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think, you know, being mindful of this, and I think we all see it in the way that families communicate with each other. And, you know, there's the trendy therapies and opportunities that come up, and families talk to each other about that. And they see an endorsement from another family as this kind of social proof that that's something that maybe they would benefit from and they should be trying as well. And I think Ginny touched on that.
Yeah, she did. She touched on it beautifully, and I guess that's where we can learn. We just need to know what our families are talking about, and you usually go, oh, okay, well, what's going on here? And you go figure it out too. So it's a good way to learn. Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. So this is, again, a pretty straightforward one, but people have a tendency to feel a need to repay others. So if I've done something for you, Dana, then you're going to feel this sense of needing to do something for me in turn.
That's true.
Yeah. And, you know, I think looking at the positive side of that, harnessing the power of those reciprocal relationships for collaboration to establish an evidence base is a really positive thing. Fostering a supportive learning environment is a really positive thing.
Absolutely. And I think this is where, I guess Ginny spoke about before as well, that sort of the warm fuzzies that you can get when you're helping a family, you know, that sort of professional relationship versus friendship. Those are things that can happen. They're real, you know, people. We are going to have relationships with people. And just knowing that there is that difference between the two, I think is really important, so that if you need to have a conversation on a different kind of level, you can. But it is worth just acknowledging that this does exist in our communication.
Definitely. Okay, we'll save the biggest till last.
It is the big one,
but the final one is consistency and commitment. So the explanation of this one is quite simple, but when we unpack it, it can get quite complex, I think. People align their opinions with their commitments. So I think we've all fallen foul to joining a gym and signing a contract and feeling obliged to go to said gym and feeling guilty when you don't go to said gym because you've made that commitment to do that, and it's really hard to get out of it. But I think where my mind goes to in terms of working with families or with, you know, speaking to other clinicians is this idea that Ginny touched on as well. When you've invested a lot of time and effort and money into training in a certain type of therapy or intervention, it can be really hard to let go of that, despite what the evidence might tell you, because you've made that commitment in one way or another to that therapy.
Yeah, 100%. And that goes for not just us as clinicians, but for our families too. How many times have we heard about families who fundraise or they save every penny to do something, and therefore when they go and engage with it, they'll only want to see the positive because they've engaged so much in it. So challenging them on that notion of what it is that they see is not particularly fruitful, even though we might all see it. So it is something always worth considering for, and it comes back to the likability part of it too. Challenging something that someone's invested so much into, is a time process like it is for us to move through. So giving them that grace, giving them that time to be able to see and show them another method or show them another outcome is more important than coming onto it really hard.
Because what you're wrestling with is this, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the sunk cost fallacy. So, you know, people are really reluctant to abandon a strategy because they've invested really heavily in it. Even when all of the evidence around them tells them to abandon it, it's a real struggle and it's a real pressure point for all of us. Like I think we can all, there will be examples that come to mind for all of us where we found ourselves in a situation where our belief is challenged and it's a really difficult thing to let go of that. But I think back to what Jessica Stokes-Parish said to us about our confirmation bias, and when you feel really strongly about a particular topic or issue, to just do it the courtesy of looking into the counter of that argument and at least being aware of that and holding that in your mind at the same time as all of the information that confirms your position on something.
Yeah, and what we see on social media, on all of our feeds really is a curated feed. I purposely make sure I feed mine lots of puppy videos and lots of restaurants and cafes. I know where everything is, I know what's opening, and I'll be there after the lines subside because I don't like lining up for things. But that's what your feed will look like. But if you're curious looking at different things, and a family is always looking at something for their own family or their child, that's all they're going to see as well. So it's worth knowing what's there. You might not think it's a really popular thing because you haven't been looking it up. But it's just worth looking at that other side because there's different interests and different I guess vested interest as well for a person. And I think if we look at the positive side of consistency and commitment as well, that really talks to the power of goal setting and working with families to set goals, review goals. And that's right.
I think you're going to cover goal setting
I will be.
a little bit later on in the conference.
Supercharge your goal setting. I'll definitely be doing that. It's a good one. Okay, so I love this slide because where the science ends, translation begins. Can I think about that for a second? And basically it's all just mushed into the one. I think that 17 years that we spoke about is true, but then there needs to be a bigger effort for everyone, from researchers and funders alike, all the way through the whole continuum of who's involved in research to be part of translation. And translation of that means constantly communicating. What's important to someone right now, investigating what that is, having them involved in that whole process and feeding it back out again. I've seen firsthand what that can look like, and the key for all of that is making sure that whatever it is you found gets to as many people as you can, or if something's actually dangerous and causing harm, like what Jenny spoke about with hyperbaric oxygen and people losing hearing potentially, it's important that that message goes out quickly as well, not 17 years. But we all have a role to play in that.
Definitely. I think the other thing on that as well is that science evolves. And so it's our responsibility to be across the evolution of science and how it's changing, and for our messaging and communication to be in line with the most recent and contemporary evidence out there.
That's right. That's a lovely note to finish up on. Thank you so very much, Ash. Thank you to everyone for listening. And for people who've tuned in online, remember you can head to our website, ResearchWorks.net, if you want to have a link to any of the other articles we've been talking about. And there's a CPD form there that you can fill out as well if you want to keep this as part of record of your PD requirements. I say that a lot. So from all of us right now, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you all again next time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.